Hello, everybody, and good afternoon. I'm News 13's Amy Hoyt. We are live in our newsroom this afternoon on Harrison Avenue. As you know, today is the 13th of the month, and that means it is Buddy Check Day. As we fight breast cancer together, it's a reminder for you to check for lumps, and if you find one, to go to your doctor and get a mammogram. On the 13th of every month, we try each month to bring you a story, a breast cancer survivor, a doctor, someone who can talk to you about the experience you may be going through if you've been diagnosed or perhaps a future diagnosis or maybe someone in your family. And today we have a very special guest. Her name is Ida Montgomery. She is a retired lieutenant colonel in the U.S. Army, and we're so glad to have her with us. Thank you for joining us this afternoon.
Thank you so much for having me, Amy. I really appreciate this opportunity to discuss breast cancer and my personal journey with it.
Before we get to your diagnosis and your treatment, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, as you said, I am a retired Army officer. We called Bay County our home since 2019. We did miss Hurricane Michael. I teach at the University of West Florida. I teach in their Masters of Science Nursing Family Nurse Practitioner program. I am a family nurse practitioner, and I have my doctorate in nursing practice. I've been practicing for 22 years. The majority of that time was in the military. I am married to a retired Army aviator for 26 years, and we have two children who are age 13 and age 15.
All right, and so we appreciate your service first. Let me tell you that you and your husband, we appreciate that so very much. And as a nurse practitioner, I know this puts a little bit of a twist on it because you have medical knowledge more than most of us would have. So tell me about your diagnosis. There's no family history, correct?
That's correct, Amy. I retired in 2019 from the Army. I relocated here in Bay County, and life was good. 2021, February, I found a breast mass. I actually found it while I was laying in bed at night and went to turn over it, and it was very hard. And I just said, well, I'll just look at it in the morning. I'm not going to get up and look. And so in the morning, sure enough, it was there. And that's when COVID was happening. And so I get care from the VA, and so I did a healthy vet message to my doctor and gave her the clinical impression, where it was located, the size of it, and it was immobile, and she ordered my diagnostic mammogram and ultrasound. It was a little bit of a struggle to get booked just because, again, with backups and COVID, but I was able to get my diagnostics done, which was a BI-RADS-4, meaning highly suspicious for malignancy. From there, it was a little bit of how to work the system to get my core biopsy done, which I did. And once you get that core biopsy done, then you have a diagnosis of cancer, which I did. And once you have the diagnosis of cancer, it moves very quickly after that. I want to tell women, one thing to know is when you're a woman, I was 49 at the time, with a breast mass, a lot of times people can tell you it's fibrocystic breast disease or it's menopause, so it's a fibroadenoma. And you know your body. And so if you feel that it's more than that, I always would recommend pushing for diagnostic mammogram and ultrasound to see. And the only way you can really tell if something is cancer or not is to do a core biopsy, is to stick a needle in it and get the cells out. And so once that happened, it moved a little quicker for me after that.
Tell me a little bit about how you were feeling. What was the emotion when you get that diagnosis, especially being a nurse practitioner yourself?
Well, it was, I think the most emotional part for me, or the hardest mentally for me, is I knew I had breast cancer in February, but I couldn't get it out. I felt like it was getting bigger and it was growing because I knew it was there. But until I got that diagnosis of, yes, it's breast cancer, it was more of, I was just a 49-year-old woman with a new mass in my breast. And I will say, I think the workup went quickly, but when it's in you, I don't know if it's ever quick enough, right? And so I think that was the biggest emotional thing for me, as I knew I had it. I was hoping for ductal carcinoma, which I did get, but I got invasive ductal carcinoma, which was triple-negative breast cancer. And so a little bit about triple-negative breast cancer, it happens in younger women like me, and some even younger than me, usually in their 30s or 40s, and it can happen in between mammogram screenings. And it is very aggressive, and it grows quickly.
Did you have the chemotherapy first before surgery?
I was offered adjunct, what they called adjunct chemotherapy. And again, Amy, personal choice. Every woman's journey is different. I did not want that mass inside me anymore, and to see if it responded to chemo, because how it was, if it responded to chemo, it could shrink it, and we could do a biopsy, a breast biopsy. And for me, I wanted a personal choice. I chose the mastectomy and the lymph node biopsy because I never wanted to be worried about having cancer in my breast again. And I felt for me, as long as I kept my breast, I would always be worried about that.
So they removed both. It's a double.
Yes, they did a double, and it was on my right side. The breast cancer was, but I opted for a bilateral simple mastectomy with lymph node biopsies.
Okay, and then after that, now you have to recover from the surgery, which you had done in Bay County, correct?
That is correct. I did it at Extension Sacred Heart in Bay County, and Dr. Tenniswood was my surgeon, and his nurse Stephanie. They were great, and he's retired Air Force, and I thought he got it really well with me and related to me, and I had a wonderful experience with him.
I don't have to tell you how important nurses are, right? All right, so tell me about the chemotherapy.
So then after my bilateral mastectomy, which was done in April, about 4 weeks later, I started chemo. And I did get a life port in, which I still have. And with chemotherapy, that was another thing. I think the first thing, the worst word in medicine, the worst C word in medicine is not cancer, it's chemo. Once you have cancer, there's a fear about chemotherapy. There's a lot of, how hard it's going to be on your body, and, the throwing up, or you're going to, and I really had this fear that I was going to be a shell of myself, and I didn't want my kids to see me suffering. And again, that was something that you have to mentally, something just flipped in me and said, I can't fathom my children seeing me sick, or my husband, and so it's just not going to happen. And so just the day before, I said, it's going to be fine. And I have to tell you, chemo was fine. My husband drove me to my first appointment because you have to have a driver, but after that, I drove myself. I did do the triple therapy. You do those for 4. So I did 16 rounds of chemo, and then I did chest wall radiation.
Did you get what they call the red devil?
Yes, I did. Adriamycin is what that medication is, and it is called the red devil because it comes in a syringe, and they slowly push it through your port. And the minute that you get it, you feel a little sensation. I felt a little bit in my head, like a little off. That's all I can really describe it, is you feel a little off with it. But I also think it's important. There's studies out from MD Anderson as well as other cancer research places that tells us that if women who's doing chemotherapy, if they exercise, and we're talking walking, 8 to 10 minutes a day, can really help circulate that chemo and decrease some of the side effects that you have from it.
Now, you're generally probably healthier than most because you're a runner, correct? You've been running for years?
That's correct. I've done 5 marathons and 3 triathlons.
And
so
maybe this was an additional shock for you.
It was. I thought, well, I don't smoke. I don't have any risk factors. I have 4 sisters, and there's no other breast cancer in my family. And it was a shock for me. And I think that's the other thing. It's kind of devastating, and you kind of go through the whole denial and bargaining and, grief and anger before you get to acceptance. And once you accept it, I want to say that breast cancer is not the worst thing that can ever happen to you, and that it's not a death sentence. And although there are many women who don't make it, there are many women who do.
Tell me how your kids were feeling when you got the initial diagnosis. You have a boy and a girl, correct?
Yes, ma'am, I do. And initially, we didn't tell our kids. My husband and I knew probably together for about 4 weeks. We didn't tell him until I had to have the surgery because they was still in school. It was in May, and so we didn't want to worry them or anything like that. And so my son is very intelligent. My daughter is too, but he's kind of an old soul. So when I told him, he just said, well, that's okay, Mom. Like, what stage is it, and what is your chances? So basically, he asked me what type of cancer and my prognosis, right? My daughter was she's a little bit more emotional. And of course, I think the fear is that not only may I not make it, but they don't want to see their mom in pain. And so I think it affects the whole family. I would even go on to say, Amy, that it's harder on the people you love than the person who has it. And the reason I say that is because I have to accept that I have breast cancer, and I have to know that, be okay with it. If it comes back, I know I can do everything that I can, but if these cells the dormant cells start to recirculate and form another tumor, I get metastasis, I have to know that that's okay, that I've done everything I can. But it's the people you love that they don't want to lose you, and it becomes, it's harder for them to accept at times.
How'd you tell your husband?
I told him when I actually got the mammogram. I kind of told him before I got it, and he kept saying kind of wait. But the minute I got the mammogram and ultrasound, he said, can we wait to the core biopsy? And I said, we can, but we're just putting off the obvious. I have breast cancer, and so we need to start thinking about that. And that was hard because my husband and I have talked about death before. We both have deployed, and we've talked about, like, if we don't come home, what our wishes are for the kids and that kind of thing. But it's weird because when we retired, we thought we were done with all that, right?
Yeah.
And so that was we have to talk about, finances and where things go and, wills and all of that again. So it was kind of a shock.
I'm sure it was. I mean, it had to have been. And now you have a daughter who you've become the baseline for that history in the family. So she'll have to check when she gets older.
Yeah. Now, the good thing about that, Amy, is I am BRCA or BRCA gene mutation negative, and that's a blessing. And the reason I say that is I don't genetically carry that gene to pass on to my daughter. Now, 70% of the patients who get triple negative breast cancer have a mutation in that gene. So I did think I was going to pass it to not only my daughter, but my son as well. They can have increased risk, but I am not a carrier, and I did not pass that to them. So that was a big relief for me.
Let's go back to the treatment. So you finish chemo and then you move on to radiation?
Yes, ma'am, that is correct.
All right, tell us how radiation goes.
Radiation is not a big deal at all. I mean, you get some chest wall burns. I think most of the time women complain of fatigue. And again, I didn't really have too many side effects from radiation. I continued to run. I ran 3 miles the last day of my chemo treatment, and because I said this is me on recovery. So mentally I had to get through it, but very blessed. And I got to tell you, the cancer affiliates, they do a great job. And my oncologist and radiologist, Dr. Finkelstein and Dr. Haberman, they did a great job with my care, as well as all the staff there.
And all of your treatments, again, were in Bay County. You didn't have to leave.
Yes, ma'am. All of them was in Bay County. I made the decision to stay here because of my kids and husband. I didn't want to leave to go to MD Anderson or the Mayo Clinic or someone who does research, simply because what if this is the last, my days are numbered, I want to spend them at home. And I really think that helped me get through it, because I made sure even when I didn't feel good to get up and do things, because I didn't want them to see me like that. And so it was very helpful for me.
You're a very strong woman, obviously, for being able to do that. It's hard. I mean,
Yes.
Even you probably had to push yourself, no?
No, yes, absolutely. There was days I didn't feel well. And I will tell you this, I said, tomorrow it will be better. And, I woke up in the morning and it was better. And I thank God and got out of bed. I had the headaches, the nosebleeds, the body aches, the bone pain, everything you get with chemo. It's how a lot of times I just didn't pay attention to it, if that makes sense.
Right.
It's kind of like being deployed. And I said that many times. When you first go through a deployment, when you first get there, you don't complain about it or you don't think about going home. But the same thing with cancer treatment. And when chemo first started, I didn't look at the end because I was kind of like in the middle of it. And then when it gets closer to the end, it's like when you get closer to go home from deployment, it acts like it's never going to end. And so you have to kind of talk yourself through that.
All right, let's talk a little bit about your military service, because your circumstances are different than a lot of women. But there are a lot of women serving in the military today who do serve overseas. Tell us what the tie could be.
Right now, the NIH has funded a study that has went through the University of Alabama veterans, and the title of the study is Mechanisms That Impact Metastatic Progression of Triple Negative Breast Cancer. And in this study, what they found was service women who have served overseas and in combat that's been exposed to burn pits have a 20 to 40% increased risk of getting triple negative breast cancer compared to our civilian counterparts. And that's big. And the reason that is big, we're seeing younger women in the military who have deployed who's getting triple negative breast cancer. So what I really hope to do is help them be good consumers, not only get mammograms, but if something comes back that doesn't look right on the mammogram, ask for diagnostic mammograms or ultrasound or the 3D mammograms. They're even recommending MRIs for women who have been deployed over in combat.
What's in those burn pits?
There's lots of things in the burn pits. There's plastics, there's fuels, there's things that get burned over there that, we all were exposed to. There's ongoing studies too, just so you know, for colon cancer and brain cancer, increased risks for our service women and men who have deployed. I will say the VA has been very good to me, and my military service I would never give up. The 24 years in the military was very good for me. It's women, or service members, I should say, who didn't retire or do 24 years, that did 10 years and got out, and then maybe 10 years later, they end up with having cancer. And that's the problem. Sometimes we're exposed to stuff and we don't get cancer right away, and it's hard to make that link. I will say that there's some things in Congress right now, and they're doing some presumptive, tying it back to your deployments and also giving you medical care. The big thing is the medical care for the people who have, our veterans who are getting cancer.
Have you been invited to speak before Congress to talk about your experience, since you know firsthand?
No, I have not, but I know that there are rallies that are up there, and there's several speakers. There's some veterans groups right now that was lobbying, and in January, presumptively, triple-negative breast cancer is going to be tied to your deployments for our servicewomen who were veterans.
And so what's going through Congress now, you're trying to get help for those who may not have done the full 20 years and have VA benefits after a retirement. Maybe they only did 7 years or 8 years or 10, correct?
Correct, because medical care is very costly in our country, and not everybody can afford it. And even when you have health insurance, there's copays, but in the VA system, I didn't pay copays, right? I did my whole treatment and the VA covered it, from my surgery, from my workup to my surgery to my chemo and to my follow-ups. And that's huge, and that would be huge for a veteran service member that didn't retire after 20 years but spent 7 or 10 years and deployed overseas in defense of our great nation.
When you were around those burn pits and you were overseas, did this ever cross your mind? Gee, I wonder what's in the air here?
No, I never, you have inherent risk when you deploy. And I think once you're over there, it's the thing of coming home alive, right? And I'm glad you asked that question, because, it's when you have something like this, you can start to feel sorry for yourself. But remember, there are service members that have deployed that didn't come home. They came home indifferent. They didn't have a life anymore. And there's also ones that came home missing limbs and had to learn to walk again with prosthesis. And then we talk about our service members who have come home with what we call invisible wounds, right? Not visible that we can see, but PTSD as well as MTBI. And so those are, we have had a long ongoing campaign and confrontation for 20 years. And it's not deploying. A lot of our soldiers have deployed multiple times, which again increased risk and other things too. So I always felt lucky to come home. And even to this day, I still feel lucky to come home. And that's, to get through breast cancer, I had to realize that, and I had to, what I say, tap into my warrior mentality. I've been through a lot of things, and I think every woman or every person is stronger than they know they are. It's not until you're really challenged until you have to find that strength.
What about your faith? Did that play a role in your recovery?
Oh yeah, absolutely. You surround yourself with good people, and I did pray, and I asked, I just asked to wake up in the morning, and I asked, to give me one more day, because I've had a really good life. And when I say that, I mean, I have given unconditional love and I have received unconditional love. And that's more than a lot of people have. And so you have to come with terms that you have breast cancer, and children get cancer and they pass away from it. And so, for whatever reason I'm on this journey, I know it's for some reason. And I just pray that I can have more time. But I know if I don't have time, meaning I want to be a grandma, right? I want to see my kids graduate from high school and from college. But if that doesn't happen, I know I will live in their hearts forever. And so that's very comforting to me.
Is there anything I haven't asked you that you would want women out there watching to know about either military service or breast cancer, or both tied together?
I think with breast cancer, as well as other type of females cancer, like ovarian cancer, which gets missed and misdiagnosed a lot, as a woman, you know your body. And when you do a breast exam or you feel a lump or you know something's not right, don't just take, oh, it's perimenopausal or it's cyclic or it'll go away. I think that you have to be a good consumer of healthcare, and you have to say, no, I really need to get this checked out, or I want a mammogram or a diagnostic mammogram or ultrasound. They'll usually start with the mammogram first. And even that, when I say that, in endometrial cancer, just so you know, endometrial ovarian cancer also can be what you call the silent killer, because women can have symptoms like bloating and stomach pain, and they don't really get that it's ovarian cancer. And so know that when something's not right, just don't take no for an answer. Even if you have to visit another, if you have to ask your primary care for a referral or you have to see an OBGYN, just make sure you're persistent and you know your body.
Spoken like a true nurse practitioner. I think that person just came out in you. Or the mom, I'm not sure.
It may have been both.
Well, we sure appreciate you coming in and sharing your story today. It's been an honor to meet you. And again, we thank you and your husband for your service to our country. Retired Lieutenant Colonel, U.S. Army, Ida Montgomery. Thank you, Ida.
Thank you so much, and thank you for this opportunity.
And thanks to everyone watching on their computers today. We'll see you next time.